Hi, I'm Kaylee Jones, and I am teaching the screenwriting seminar here this week, and welcome all to our afternoon panel. I am very, very pleased to have gathered this panel, and it's really because I asked my friends to come, and they were kind enough to agree to do that. And I don't know yet what I have promised them in return for showing up here, but I'm sure it's going to be something huge. But I'm very grateful because they're very busy people with a lot going on, and I will tell you about them. Starting over at the other end is, I've got my little list here because they've done so much, it's really hard to remember all these things. Linda Plante, at my far left, was born in Liverpool, England, and she trained as an actress at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art, and she worked with the National Theatre and the Royal Shakespeare Company before turning to writing. And she's created some of the most successful drama series in the United Kingdom. Her original scripts for the much acclaimed Prime Suspect series with Helen Mirren, which in fact is one of the best things I've ever seen on TV, has won many prizes, including Emmys, BAFTAs, and an Edgar Allan Poe Writers Award. She's also written 9 best-selling novels, including The Legacy, The Talisman, Bella Mafia, Entwined, Cold Shoulder, Cold Blood, Cold Heart, and I could go on and on. Linda writes and produces all her own work in the United Kingdom. In America, she has co-written and produced The Prosecutors with Tom Fontana for NBC, and she also produced Bella Mafia from her novel, with the Königsberg Company, and that was a 4-hour miniseries on CBS, some of you may remember. LaPlante has also co-produced with ABC her adaptation of an English series, Widows, and produced her novel Cold Shoulder as a pilot for New Regency and CBS. And also The Warden, which is a 2-hour pilot for TNT, a changed format of her very highly successful series in the United Kingdom called The Governor. In 2001, she formed Cougar Films with producer Sophie Balhatchet, to develop and produce feature films, including her own projects. She's been made an honorary fellow of the British Film Institute and was given the BAFTA Dennis Potter Writers Award in 2000. So that is one of our panelists, Linda LaPlante. Next to her is Terry George, who is actually Irish from birth, from Belfast, I believe, yes. He began writing plays, I think plays, which my husband and I actually went to see in New York at the Irish Theatre many years ago, and his first produced feature film was, he wrote In the Name of the Father, which was a magnificent film which came out in 1993 and was nominated and I think received numerous awards. He wrote and directed Some Mother's Son, which came out in 1996, a wonderful film about a hunger strike in a Belfast prison, which was inspired by his own very deep emotional reaction to the Bobby Sands case, who starved himself to death. He went on a hunger strike in prison because the IRA prisoners were not treated as political prisoners, but as violent criminals in the prison system in the UK. He wrote The Boxer, which starred Daniel Day-Lewis in 1997. He also wrote and directed A Bright Shining Lie, which was an HBO film starring Bill Paxton and Amy Madigan, which was about, it was adapted from Neil Sheehan's 1988 Pulitzer Prize-winning bestseller. It was a $14 million project, docudrama for HBO, which was quite marvelous. And he wrote, lastly, Heart's War, starring Bruce Willis, which came out in 2002. So that's Terry George, who also wears 2 hats. Oh, I also forgot, it was his idea, and he wrote many of the episodes for the first year of The District, which is a very interesting and wonderful television drama which takes on very huge political issues, which is very unusual for American TV. So Terry wears 2 hats as well as Linda, and both directing, producing, and 3 hats, and writing. Jules Feiffer, many of you know because he's teaching a workshop here this week, and he's been kind enough to join my panel. He's best known in our family for Bark George, but that's another story. My daughter has decided that I actually work in a good place because the man who wrote Bark George works here as well. So the college has gone way up in her estimation. But besides Bark George, which in my family is the most important thing, Jules is a Pulitzer Prize winning cartoonist for the Village Voice, and it established his reputation as one of the leading satirists in America. Let's see, the Feiffer, which was his cartoon in the Village Voice, was featured there from 1956 to 1997. He's one of the few cartoonists to expand to film and theater. He's won Plaudits Awards for his plays, Little Murders, Grown Ups, Knock Knock, and Elliot Loves, and also his films, Carnal Knowledge, which many of you saw last week, I believe, and again, Little Murders, which he wrote a screenplay for, Popeye, and I Want to Go Home. Little Murders won the Obie Award and the London Theatre Critics Award and the Outer Circle Critics Award. These are many award winners we have here. His first collection, Sick, 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 was followed by Passionella and Other Stories. So he also wears two hats, or more than two hats. And there was an animated feature based on Monroe, which won an Academy Award in 1961. Since 1993, he's written children's books, 7 so far, one of which is the famous Bark George I was just telling you about. The first one was called The Man in the Ceiling. He was a regular contributor to the op-ed page of the New York Times, and he won the George Polk Award for Journalism as well. In 1999, Southampton College awarded him an honorary degree, and he addressed the graduating class. In the fall, he will begin his 4th year teaching a writing class at Southampton that he calls Humor and Truth. And, oh, I went the other way. Anyway, and last but absolutely not least is Beverly Camhe, my friend who actually brought us Linda LaPlante, somebody who's been a friend to me for many years. And Beverly started out as a VP for development. She was an executive in many important production companies beginning in the 70s. She was at Tomorrow Entertainment, which turned books into TV movies. Then she was at Lorimar. She worked for David Susskind, and she worked at Orion. And now, let's see, some of the films that she is responsible for are, for example, The Agony and the Ecstasy, which was a soap movie for Disney. She did He, She, and Me, a comedy set against the sexual revolution in the 70s. The Magic Touch, which is work in progress, world in progress. Work in progress, and The Celestine Prophecy is her new project right now, which she's collaborating with the author of the book, James Redfield, to turn it into a screenplay. Beverly also produced Junior, which came out in 1994. She was the executive producer. That was starring Arnold Schwarzenegger and Danny DeVito, among others. The Package with Gene Hackman and Tommy Lee Jones, which came out in 1989. And The Believers, starring Martin Sheen, Robert Loggia, and that was directed by John Schlesinger, and that came out in 1987. So Beverly's been very busy too producing. She's now also writing. So these are all people who are wearing many hats in this business, and that's our panel. I'm now going to sit down and let them talk for a while, because I think I've talked enough. And after they speak for a bit on the subject of screenwriting really is the center of this, since you're all writers, and I'm sure we're all interested to know how to break into that business and what is this business really about and how does it work. You will be allowed to ask questions of them, as long as they're intelligent questions. Joking. Okay. And so I'll now join them, and I guess we'll start at the end of the table and work this way. So thank you.
Can you hear me? Is this all right? Everybody hear me? Okay. There's so much you can say about writing, how to do it, where to put, whatever. And so I'm sure the other panelists will fill you in a lot better than myself. What I thought I'd talk about is something every writer has to get used to, and that is rejection. And to understand it from the get-go is really something you have to swallow and not pay any attention to whatsoever. Because the more successful you are, it never stops. And I don't think I know of any writer that actually is able to dismiss it. you still feel the anger, no matter how successful you are. I also keep the names of every bad critique I've ever had with a vengeance. I am an incredibly prolific writer. The word prolific, when describing me, and particularly in England, is as if I have a disease. So it's always Linda Plante, the very prolific writer. Because they infer that because I'm prolific, I can't really be very good. So anyway, what I thought I'd just tell you, have I got 10 minutes?
You've got
Yeah? Okay.
You're so prolific, we have to give you extra.
Yes, is, you know, people say, why do you have your own production company? And it's to maintain control and get rid of rejection as much as possible. But I'll just show you a little arc of something that's recently happened. And that is, I have a new novel, which is called Royal Flush. It's not out in America yet, but it's coming out. It has been in England remarkably successful. It's romped up the top 10. It has critically been acclaimed, even though I am prolific. Anyway, I'm just going to tell you very quickly what it's about. And it's about an aristocratic man who has a past of a criminal. But he's managed to create the veneer of sophistication, and in England, the upper class voice. So he speaks very refined. And he has a great stud farm. So all his illegal activity he's put into the stud farm. And he believes he has a great champion, a Derby winner. When it all crashes down and he loses everything he has, so he turns back to robbery and he draws in the old team that he once worked with, who are now all 50, 60 years of age. And they pull the biggest heist in history in England. They steal the crown jewels. So that's basically the book. It is about class. It is very, very English. And I was very fortunate to go to a version at the Royal Film Academy of Lion in Winter, which starred the great Peter O'Toole. And the lineup I saw at this film was Peter O'Toole, hello baby, hello darling, he was doing all that. There was Richard Harris, there was Omar Sharif and Tim Dalton, and they greeted each other like brothers. And later in the evening, I was watching these men interact. They were being very, very witty, very, very funny to each other, and wonderful anecdotes about the industry. And I thought, there's my team for the robbery. That's them. Nobody in England has ever used that lineup as they are today. And the cream of it is that Sean Connery may possibly be playing the number one man, whose name is Edward de Jersey. Now, the reason I've told you this is because a very major film company got a whiff of Royal Flush. And so I'm just going to read you what their writers' report say of this project. Royal Flush is a complex novel that holds some intriguing story elements, but never develops in a manner that makes it an especially compelling piece of source material. While it functions perfectly well as a novel, the character structure and the main story points that would need major renovations to make a worthwhile entertaining feature, leaving us with little beyond the basic premise to invest in. It's very boring. The two things we have to look at when considering a heist adaptation are how original and clever the heist is and the entertainment value of the surrounding story content. In this case, neither seems to hold any substantial value. The story focuses on the domestic minutiae surrounding the various characters, especially Eddie. At no point in this book is my character, Edward de Jersey, ever referred to as Eddie. Eddie de Jersey fails to really advance any of the characters, and nor does the writer. And then at the very end, it's got here, this is from this prolific writer, well known around the world. Commercial potential. Author and material lack a built-in audience. Material offers only the most basic premise and story elements for adaptation, only worth an investment at a low price for creative talent with a clear vision on how to make the element work on the screen. So there it is, bang, in it comes. There I am, number 3 on the bestseller, and you go, what? Who is this piece of shit? Who wrote this? These nameless people. Now, you know, if I'm a young, unexperienced writer, that is such a downer. You know, it's a downer for Miss Prolificity here. So all I'm saying for me is later you can ask me questions about my work, but please don't let rejection worry you. Just toss it and go on. Thank you. Over to you.
See, the reason you get those summaries is because the executives who run the film industry are too effing lazy to read the scripts themselves. So they turn it over to an assistant who decides that the only way to prove his own genius is to be witheringly destructive of what he's read. He can't say it's great in case he's put on the spot where someone might decide to make it for $20 million and then he's carrying the can. And the reason there's two, I think in terms of opportunities for writing today, it's kind of the best of times and the worst of times. The reason it's the worst of times is because essentially the mega conglomerates have taken over the film industry. Sony, Vivendi, Rupert Murdoch, I don't know, I can't figure out who owns Disney now, and AOL, Time Warner, and that's it. That's basically it. Oh, Viacom, who I work for, sorry. 5 mega conglomerates control the whole film industry, and at the top are accountants. And there's a legend going around Hollywood, and it's probably true, that they have some sort of software program that puts the script, the characters, the director, the producers, the amount of time it took all into the software program, and out comes the projection of the budget, and before you've even made it, they know it's a flop. So you literally are in Hollywood dealing with the mega conglomerates who are only interested in the cornflakes value of film. How many cornflakes, how many tons of cornflakes can we sell? And I don't care if the cornflakes are moldy, if they have sugar on them, if they're completely gone, or if they're poisonous. How many tons of cornflakes can we sell at the multiplexes? That's all they're interested in. They, you know, of course they'll tell you, oh, this script is wonderful and it's so moving and oh, this and that, blah, blah, and then proceed to, like, as they did with Linda, just dismember it by committee. And if you're involved in Hollywood at all, I accept that. That's the way it is. I was like the 7th writer of 11 on Collateral Damage, which started off to be a Robert De Niro showcase and ended up being an Arnold Schwarzenegger God knows what movie. And Hearts War, I was one of 2 writers, but it was a movie made by committee, and that's the way it is. Now, having said that, it should also be the best of times because suddenly the medium has been democratized by the digital camcorder, the internet. The medium itself has been revolutionized, but yet, so far, only seized by the porno industry in its ability to communicate to the masses. That you can take, you know, they're the only ones who are selling, you know, using digital cameras and selling it all over the internet. Fair play to them. It pushes the whole thing on. But what I'm saying for writers is that everybody wants to make the big bucks in Hollywood, and you know, if the dice roll right for you, that could happen. But if you genuinely have a passion about a story you want to tell, you can get it told in theatre and you can get it told on film if you recruit enough eager people with you. And the Blair Witch Project kind of already cracked it. But people are going to crack that medium and make a lot of money and communicate drama in the most democratic and popular form, I think. That being said, for me, if I was starting off writing today to try to break in, I would be writing a one-person or a two-person play. Probably a two-person play in which the two actors play 3 characters each. That's the way to get into this business. Because you can take that to anywhere. 2 actors, okay, we'll get them, we'll do an equity scale show, we'll put it up here for free. You have 2 actors, the actors get to play 3 characters each, they love it, you know, forget about it, you're definitely going to get actors. And you're there, and off you go, and if it's good, it'll fly. If it's funny particularly, it'll fly, and you're in business. I started writing a play at the Irish Arts Centre. I walked in the door with a play. There was a guy painting the floor. But he was painting it in reverse. He was painting himself into a corner, painting the floor black. And I said, I'm here to see Jim Sheridan. You know, I have this play. I talked to him on the phone. He says, oh yeah, that's. And he walked across the floor, and he left the footprints across the floor. And that night, that was the set for Richard's Cork Leg, which was Brendan Behan's last play. And Jim Sheridan was acting in the lead part, had painted the floor, was running the theatre, and he put on my play. And then he wanted to turn my play into an independent movie. And he said to me, Jesus, we'll shoot it here in the Irish, you know, we'll pull this down and we'll build this into a prison camp. And I'm like, come on, you know, I got a good review in the New York Times, somebody's going to write. So he said to me, says, you know, I'm going off to Dublin, Noel Pearson wants me to do this script about Christy Brown. So I said to him, oh yeah, drunken Irish paraplegic, that's really going to go down big time. And a year and a half later, he invited me to the Oscars, you know. So that being said, and the questions will open it up, the possibilities are enormous if you seize the challenge yourself, but you know, the cornflake side of the business is just, the cornflakes are eating us, you know, rather than us eating the cornflakes.
Well, I think I should be a little more positive. So although I have a lot of coverage in my bag, but I'm not going to read it. You know, it's interesting what you said, Terry, about the, can you hear me?
Yeah.
About the play being transposed into a film. I don't know if you've seen, there's a charming movie called My Fat Greek Wedding. Yeah. Has anyone seen? Well, the evolution of that is really interesting. That started as a one-woman show by that actress. And I have to have seen it. It was just, she filled the stage with all those characters all by herself. And she was very determined to not let go of her material. And she wrote the screenplay. And then, by chance, Rita Wilson and Tom Hanks had seen the play. And so they were very encouraging, and they helped her get the movie made. And she put a wonderful cast together. And even with Tom Hanks and Rita Wilson, they couldn't get a distributor. They couldn't get anyone to even make the movie. And finally, they got a small company. And what I think is inspiring, because, you know, I work in and out of this bankrupt system called Hollywood also, but in this case, it's the audience that found this charming movie. And it started out, it wasn't meant to be a hit. It had no money behind it for advertising. It had a very limited distribution. It was meant to be in 3 theaters in America. And the audience found it, and it's just, so I think that, I mean, what I think is most important is to start with great characters and have, you know, have something compelling that you want to say, or characters that are just, you know, just driving you to write about them. And the whole thing with the industry now, too, since all these megacorps are so insecure about making anything, is it's all star-driven. It's all, wouldn't you say? It's all.
Yeah, I mean, I actually, as Linda was reading out those fantastic actors, Peter O'Toole, Sean Connery, I mean, who else did you say was there? Richard Harris, Timothy Dalton, Omar Sharif. I was just sitting thinking, a studio wouldn't make that picture.
No.
Without Sean Connery, they'd say, those guys can't open a picture, forget it, you know? You would die for that cast, you know?
No, but I think that if you write, if you write really strong characters, then, I mean, that's like your only assurance that you can have some control over your material, because then you can get it to great actors and actresses, and that's the only way that I think that you have some control about getting your movie made. When I developed the script Junior many years ago, every actor turned that movie down. And it was never going to get, all the actors were too threatened to play the first man to give birth. And then finally, I just by chance ran into Arnold Schwarzenegger at a coffee shop in Santa Monica, and he was having breakfast with his mother, who looks like Dr. Ruth, she's a tiny little woman. And I went over to him and I said, "You know, Arnold, it takes the strongest man in the world to do a woman's job." And he got up and he flexed every muscle and had said, "What is that job?" I said, "Having a baby." And his mother just laughed hysterically. And that was the beginning of getting that movie made. Even after that, it took 4 years, because it was like lining up planets. We had to wait for Danny DeVito to become available. And then when Arnold and Danny were available, Ivan Reitman, who they wanted to direct, was not available. So even with that, it took 4 years. But I don't know, I'm still an eternal optimist, and I just believe that the right material will find the right home and the right actors. But I think it all begins with the word, and I just think you have to work so hard to just get it to come alive on the page.
You're right. It all does begin with the word, which is why out there they really hate us. Writers are probably the most detested group in the film business, because directors who know they could write if they could only have the time, but they're so busy doing other things. And producers who know they could put it all together, but they're doing something more important. And everybody's doing something more important. So the hairdresser is doing something more important. Certainly the production design, location manager, far more important. And the special effects guys are doing the most important. The guys who run the car chases are the most important guys in there. And so they leave it to the least important, these out-of-work homeless people who they call writers, and who then have to keep writing and take notes, because they want to keep their swimming pools. Without accepting those notes, they don't get to keep their swimming pools, and their children don't go to those schools where they turn into drug addicts. And but the notion that any writer has any control. Writers only have control if they have a very good relationship with somebody who really has control, either the producer or the director. And then they can exercise influence, but they have no real control, unless they are one of these marginalized people who become successful. I mean, television is far more rewarding to writers who become hyphenates. They become producers. They really have some clout in the successful TV series. The writer of The West Wing is also the executive producer, or one of the executive producers. He has real clout. And so it is with most of the successful series. Those writers, television, oddly enough, gives power to the writer, but a writer only manages to retain that power, not just by being a writer. He or she must also be a producer. It's, to live through this and succeed in it, you have to have a passion and obsession and desire to do this, which I totally lack, because there are other forms I like. I mean, I love movies, and I would love to be able to write and participate in movies, but there are other forms that I also love, and that is so much easier because you don't get beat up as much. I mean, one gets beat up in the theater, but you get beat up for writing your play. That's your play that gets on. Nobody can touch it. As Alan Alda was saying the other night in the reading of John Guare's play, after the reading, that in the film business, what you do, you don't write an original script. You may think it's an original script. You may have come up with the idea, all the characters, everything there is connected to it, but it is, if you want to have it made, a work for hire, which means that after you deliver the first draft, they can fire you and hire somebody else. Or you may have in your contract that there's a second draft, but they can get rid of you. If they don't get rid of you, they can make you a stenographer and take their notes. And if you're unwilling to take their notes, they then will get rid of you and either shelve it or get somebody else. And Kenneth Lonergan had that experience with Analyze This, which he wrote as another kind of movie. It became a very successful movie with De Niro and Billy Crystal. But Lonergan decided he would never do this again, and instead he insisted on directing his next film, which was You Can Count on Me. Impossible to connect the script of one film with the other film, and it was an artful, wonderful movie, so that good films can be made. But he could only do it because he had the backing of Scorsese, Martin Scorsese, who came on. I mean, you need a name. You need somebody powerful to support you. Because writers themselves never have the power, and it's worth doing if this is your passion, if this is your love, if this is something you really care about, and so many people today do, and so you have it goes with the territory. But as everyone has said, you have to be willing to take your lumps. It's part of the game. And after a while, I mean, you can go to bed and suck your thumb, but you can't go on whining about it because everybody has the same story. You just get up and go do it.
We're going to have microphones right in a second to pass around for the questions. Is anybody here going to take care of that? Is that cool? Before we pass it to you guys, I wanted to ask Beverly something for all of us. Beverly was a producer, and she is an optimist, and I love that. Beverly's now trying to write, or is writing, has written, and is trying to help with the Celestine prophecy. And I'm curious, Beverly, how it feels to suddenly be on the other end of that, to be writing. Do you find it hard to write good character? And do you feel that you're writing with the producer in mind, or are you writing, screw them, I'm writing this because it has to be this way because this is the right way to build this character? I mean, how does that feel to you as a producer first?
Well, it feels really painful, actually. And I must say, I look in the mirror, and as the producer, I want to fire the writer most mornings. The script that I just wrote for Disney, the title just came to me one night, The Agony and the Ecstasy. I haven't had the ecstasy yet, but so it's a little harder to be optimistic as a writer, but it's interesting to be on the other side, and I realize also, not having had one on this Disney film, that it helps if you're surrounded by nurturing, creative people. I think every writer needs that. I think I have renewed, I've always had, total respect and compassion for the writer, because it's a very lonely job.
Yeah, thanks.
Now I know that.
Mary Jo, there, thanks.
I have two questions. One, what do you think of the Matt Damon, Ben Affleck Greenlight project on independent films? That's one question. The second question is more to Jules, because you've been around longer. How do you think it got to the situation that playwrights could control their work, and as John Guare was saying, they can't change a thing without asking me, and screenwriters have become the total antithesis to that, where they're really, it's horrible. So
Money.
how do you think that's so out of control? And so that's
Money. It's all money.
Who would like to respond to the Greenlight question? Anybody watch that whole series on?
Yeah, I didn't watch the notion of encouraging independent film is great, and I'm not sure how their selection process goes, I can barely read my own scripts. That's honest to God. When people give me a script to read, I try to explain to them. First of all, it's a very irritating form to read, isn't it? You know, it's like the more minimalist it is, for me, the better. Particularly when I'm the director. But then I have to turn it over to producers who say, like, you know, Joe walks down the street, what's that about? I said, well, you know, starts at one end, he goes to the other, maybe we cut in the middle, and that's it. And so I put it all in my head, which in the first draft you literally can't do. And so what I did was go to, I think, one of the masters of script writing, William Goldman, and read his scripts. Are so florally, they're fantastic to read. When you see the finished product, a lot of the time the script didn't make it on the screen. But if you read William Goldman's, just the way he puts a scene together on the page, and then start thinking like that, because that's what they want to imagine the picture in Hollywood, and then they want to change it completely. You know, once they've imagined it. So for me, that writing, how did we get on the independent film reading scripts? Anything that encourages scripts to get the chance to go to film is definitely worthwhile. The HBO documentary, I think, kind of ripped off the process and damned that film before it started. You know, the kind of reality television aspect of it killed it before it had a chance to breathe. So in that way, I detested it, but the notion itself. And I think those are two good guys who genuinely want to put back something into independent filmmaking from where they sprung themselves.
The film actually turned out quite well. Did you see it?
I didn't. I didn't. But I mean, anything that helps us to get an independent film made. I think last year was the worst year for independent film, box office and being made, almost in film history. I can't think of one. I mean, British independent films carried the day. Was there one box office?
Monsters Ball.
Well, Monsters Ball, yeah.
In the bedroom.
In the bedroom's the big one, isn't it?
Right, right. Yeah, but it's E2 Mama is like, they've got Alfonso off making Harry Potter 3. I don't get that one, you know? And I know on my work, I'm going to ask him, what, you know, I hope he says to me it's the dough, you know? He better say they're giving me $2 million, because I can't figure out why a genius director like that is doing Harry Potter 3, honestly.
$5 million.
Okay, that makes sense. There you go.
You should, you know, to answer the question about the reverence for the word in theater, it's really about the Dramatists Guild contract.
That's
right?
exactly right.
That's
Exactly right.
But there's so little done in theater, if you think about it. I mean, there's just not that many stages and not that many plays getting made. They have a very hard time. John Guare is really he's the top of the pyramid.
And the plays are just as lousy as the movies, so where does that leave you? But it does leave you with your words intact, however bad they are, I suppose.
And your copyright.
And your copyright. I mean, but the deal is, the trade-off is that playwrights don't make money. So that the writer of A Few Good Men, which was a big hit on Broadway and won its Pulitzer Prize, is now in Hollywood doing The West Wing, and he's now a zillionaire. But even with a Pulitzer Prize play and a big hit, he made some money. But then the next play he wrote was a flop, and then he didn't make money. It's under the best of circumstances. It's rare in these days for a writer to make money, survive in the theater. John manages to do it by writing play after play, but he teaches and he does other things. And most other writers do other things. But you get to hold on to your copyright, all because the Dramatists Guild, back in the late 1920s and early 30s, called a strike, and one from the producers' rights that screenwriters have never had and never have tried that much to have, because with the screenwriters from the beginning of film, the power was never with the writers, it was with the films, after all, started as silents. And a writer was brought out there to do the captions for the for silent films. And then when sound came in, they brought in some hip Broadway playwrights to write something witty, and they got all involved, but they had no stake in films, and they were coupled, and they were tripled, and 3, 4, 5, 6. This is the way the system worked. And they thought they were having a lark, and they were going to have a good time and get a lot of free drinks and screw movie stars and go back to New York. And that was it for the rest of their lives. They stayed out there, with that same system, increasingly despising themselves as they lived higher and higher. And it's the high living that allows them to go on subverting and finally squandering their talent entirely. As playwrights don't squander their talent, but they waste it on plays that open and usually close very fast and have to move on to something else. So it's very, very complicated, and you have to really love doing this to go on doing it, because there ain't a good reason otherwise. I mean, small films and independent films will get made. The means of doing it get more and more interesting, and it's endlessly complicated, but there are ups and downs. They will get made, and it's amazing that anything good gets made anymore, but somehow it manages. And the same thing with theater. With all of these forms, when there's a talent out there that insists on doing it in spite of the hard times and the hard cases and the contempt and the idiots who are in charge, and they go on doing it and doing it and doing it. It's like Pickett's charge. They're going to keep going and keep going, and finally they will win some victories and win some very important ones. But it takes a lot of stamina, a lot of courage, and, as you say, a lot of support.
Can I just say one thing that I think is very optimistic? Because I don't know if, Linda, you did this, but I was a showrunner of a TV drama series for a year, which is like I also collected garbage in Belfast, and I think the show running was definitely worse than that. It was the worst job I ever had. But if you're a good drama writer, and you are going to get a job, because I can tell you beyond doubt, there are a dearth of good TV writers in Hollywood. I don't know if it's the same in Britain. I suspect in Britain the pool is better. But I was desperate to find somebody who would answer a basic question in drama. And I'd ask this to my writing room every week, and I'd get a blank stare. I'd say, what is this about? And they'd say, well, it's about a bunch of cops and they arrest the bad guy. I said, no, but mythologically, what's the moral tale we're telling here? What's this about? Blank. And that was blank for 3 months. And then they went to the star of the show and said, this guy's a nut here, he's like, forget about it, because he's asking silly questions that don't get asked in TV anymore, at least not on American television. That being said, if you can face that challenge and prove to people that you know what drama is and can answer that question morally within yourself, this is about how a man finds his soul after he solves a crime this way. I guarantee you'll get a job. You start through theatre. Somebody sees the play that you put on somewhere and says it's good. There are armies of agents out there looking for talent because they have no talent. That's their job. They think they can spot talent, but they don't have too much themselves. And the parasitic nature of this business is huge, but the feeding ground is you guys. So I firmly believe that.
But I think also to say I am a writer is one thing, but you have to also treat it as a business. If you have money and can sit in a garret and write a stage play for 6 months, great, But the majority have to earn a living, have to provide for families or whatever. And so the attitude of the writer that I've just written this wonderful script, I'm going to send it here. Pointless. It's quite good to get an agent as well. But the business of it is, if you send your script to the wrong department of any TV, it won't get read. if you send in a script, an unsolicited script, I very much doubt if it will be read. They're coming in shoalfuls. And so everybody has their job. And so if scripts, unsolicited scripts are coming in and to the wrong departments, I will guarantee it will not be read. But if you've written a drama and it goes to the right person, all you got to do is pick up the phone and ask, who heads the drama department? Be it NBC, ABC, CBS. There is a head of a drama department. There is a commissioning editor. And learn, and it's very much also part of the writer's profession, to learn how to write a treatment. If you spend 9 months writing a full block script, I will guarantee somebody's going to come right in underneath you and break your heart. You're going to say, that's my script. I wrote that. But he didn't. The ideas are there and people are going, wallop, wallop. They're grabbing them down. So get to understand a treatment. If you need to know how to write a treatment, turn the newspaper over. Look at the headlines in the paper. Look what a newspaper does. Hits you between the eyes. What makes you buy a newspaper? Is it a photograph? A one-liner at the top? Learn the treatment. So once you've got that off, the other thing that are now, it's very, very hard for a writer. That treatment goes in, somebody says, I like this. This is a good idea. Somebody could also steal it. So you protect yourself. You know, an agent is your protection. Or you log it, but it's tough to protect even your title. Now, once you're through the door, you have to go through another process that a writer never really used to have to go through in the past, because somebody was doing it for. They said, oh, this is the writer's work. It's very good. You know, it was cared for. Now, they're coming in. Bang, bang, coming. So what the writer also has to learn is they say, so, Roses for Mother, what's it about? You're through the door, you're in, you've got 1 foot in. If you blow it, the next round is blowing it. When you are unable to actually very concisely say, this is what this show is about, they like it a bit more. Now you're going to tease out of them a commission, money. So far they've paid nothing. And so that process is a different world that writers never used to have to go through, but you have to nowadays.
Thank you. That's a very good point. Question?
In the last, 10, 15 years, the teaching, is this not on?
Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. In the last 10 or 15 years, the teaching of screenwriting has become sometimes, I think, a bigger industry than screenwriters. Michael Hagee, Bob McKee, Sid Field, Trudy, all those guys. I'd love to hear your comments about this formalized field of teaching screenwriting that exists now, and is that some potential for aspiring screenwriters, or does it fit you into a mold?
Well, I like to respond to that. I think not. I think that if I am shocked when film students come and pitch projects to me from film school, and their only reference is other films. I mean, I think that if they, could discuss Joseph Campbell or Jung or, literature, that would
What's
be,
that?
Yeah, and I think the shelves are just overflowing with all these books on how to write screenplays, and I really think that's
That's an important
disaster.
point. There was a time when films, good or bad, referred to life in some aspect. Now films, with the proliferation of film schools, now all films, or just about all films, all successful commercial films just about, refer to other films. And Oliver Stone in his film knows about men and women, not from any experience he's ever had with men and women. You can tell that from watching his work on the screen, but from movies about men and women, what Tracy and Hepburn did with each other, what other characters, how men and women react to each other on screen. You can see it over and over again in other people's films, that this is taken from this movie and that from that movie, because what they seem to have left out in terms of their experience is simply life. They don't seem to have cottoned to it or taken any notes from it or remembered any of it, or think that any of it will count or any of it is commercial. So they go to the form that is best remembered, most familiar, and easiest to pitch. It's like this movie. It's like the other movie. That's the pitch. And the pitch is very successful. The film isn't.
Well, I actually like a lot of those books and stuff. I read them. particularly Linda Seeger and some because it gives me a structure within which to do whatever I want. You know, take life. The first thing is life experience. You know, I deal mostly in non-fiction. I find writing fiction hard because the width of the universe has just multiplied beyond my head. I can't deal with it, you know? Jerry Conlon goes to jail. He doesn't turn into a frog or, you know, a 16-legged monster or whatever. But the books made me think in that 3X structure, and then the TV books made me think in the 4, you know, the break I need before the ads and so forth. So that, it helped me a lot with that. And then the combination of that and tangential thinking were the two things that spark, you know, where you get to a situation and you can say, what if, boom, off you go here or there. Then the story starts to build up. So I'm not in favor of like the industry of screenwriting teaching, which I think is mostly for failed screenwriters, you know. But the books themselves, I think, have value for sure, yeah.
I think the most important thing is that if you have got a commission and send in the script and you don't have interior, exterior, and the actual format of how they like a script, be it to the page count, the reader will have a problem reading it. Because that's all they do is read, read, read. Also, they can weigh a script. They go, oh, this is too long. You're going, but it might be absolutely incredible. So it's a few pages too long. No, it's too long. Too big. Won't have it. So, I mean, that interior, exterior, and somebody can say, well, where do you get the scripts from? They'll send them out if you want them. Any of the networks, any of the places. You can go and buy them. Very interesting for there's a script out of the latest Tom Hanks film. What's it?
Road to Perdition.
Road to Perdition. It's very interesting in the little book that they're selling is how many scenes were omitted from the original screenplay. So it's all there. All you got to do is go out and get it. I mean, you can sit in a lecture and get somebody, you know, telling you how to put interior, exterior, car chase. And also, you learn, you know, you can actually write for 2 pages of, then the car turns the corner, heads down the road, over the bridge, into the river. And you've got to say, sometimes you just cut through it, just say car chase, because that will come in later. But it's that experience and watching, as Terry said, it's all out there. I remember speaking at a film academy, and I talked about one of the greatest films I've ever seen in my life, which is Abel Gance's Napoleon. And you look at this film, a silent movie, and you just can't take your eyes off it. And talk about split screens being a modern invention. Bingo, 1923, 1 screen, 2, 3. It is, if you haven't seen it, go and have a look. That was 1923, superb piece of filming. And it's all there. It's on the TV. You know, just push the button on the TV, look at it, look at it, look at it, because it's coming at you. You know, and you make notes. Why do you look at a script and say on a TV thing, this is good? What hooks you in? What's hooking you in is hooking all the other audience in. So learn, when does the hook come? You know, sometimes you don't. The first note I ever got from a brilliant editor was on a script. They said, do you intend losing your leading lady for 110 pages? I hadn't even noticed I had.
Yeah, there's basics. And I think you have, on the DVD has to be the screenwriter's greatest assistance. Not the, you know, I'm so sick of listening to the director saying how wonderful the actor was, you know, get out of here. So one of the, at least I think it was on Snatcher, where Guy Ritchie and somebody else sounded as though they were drunk and having a laugh. You know, that was a good commentary, but these other ones, but the actual DVD itself, where you can, you know, watch the scene constructed or slow it up or see, I think that's fantastic. Particularly if you have the screenplay and read it first, and then see how it translates and what the actor does and so forth.
And
So-
see what's cut. That's what's fascinating.
Right,
Yes.
and where the cut is. David Mamet's thing is about writing scenes, is you're not writing the scenes, you're writing the cuts. What gets you from that scene to the next scene? What's the bridge? Because that's the driving, that's the horse that's pulling the the carriage along? Is that, you know, how do you get from A to B? Do you jump to another scene? What's the involvement of it? And I thought that's a clever thing to remember.
A good book to read is on editing. I think
Yeah,
that's
a
really
great
helpful.
book. Norman
There's-
writes good stuff about.
Yeah, there's one great book by Carol Rice on film editing, which I always recommend, which is really.
Yes.
Linda, in Prime Suspect.
Sam, did you want to take the mic? Oh, it's a new one.
Prime Suspect, which is written unbelievably fabulous, plus Helen Mirren. I mean, you know, that's like I think the greatest personal television show I've ever seen. And how hard was it to get that made with a woman detective as the main character?
It was quite difficult because I was really a bit desperate at the time, and I'd worked for a producer at the BBC who moved over to another company called Granada. And she called me up and she said, I'm now at Granada and we're looking for material. And so I was in like Flynn, you know, there, have a cup of coffee. So I thought, now I'll play this cool. So I said, what are you actually looking for? And she said, well, you know, the discussion is we really, really want a cop show. I said, I've got one of those. Yes, I've been working on one. Total lie. So she said, well, you know, they're really quite interested in bringing up a female lead. I said, now, that's very odd, because my police officer's female. She said, really? She said, but we really want her in plain clothes. I said, well, this is unbelievable. She's in plain clothes. She said, really? Oh, this is terrific. What kind of things does she do? I said, well, are you looking for a really dark show? Because this is quite a dark show. She said, oh, yes. I said, well, murder. That's what she does. She's doing murder. And meanwhile, this Loeb's going, oh, God. Oh, my. So she said, well, what's it called? And I said, Prime Suspect. I never thought of it. Nothing. She said, well, I love that. She said, that's a great title, Prime Suspect. And I'm thinking, oh, that is a very good title. So she said, do you have anything down? I said, oh, I've been working on it for quite a while. She said, great, could you get it into us like a few days, just a treatment? We only want the treatment. I said, right. And I rang the police and I kept saying, do you have any female leading, very high-ranking officers in plain clothes? And they were going, well, I said, murder, they've got to be murder. Yes, we do have high-ranking and in plain clothes and murder squad, yeah. I said, well, how many have you got? Have you got a lot? He said, 3. In the whole of the Metropolitan Police, there were 3 women high-ranking officers. So I said, could I possibly meet one? And he set up the meeting, and there was a knock on my door opened, and there was my character. She fed it to me. She took me to the forensic, the pathology, everything. Took me there by the hand, and, you know, she was the character. And that's how it came out. And when they got the script in, it was somebody thinking, ooh, a bit worrying here. I mean, she shows no emotion. You know, when she's handling the body, wouldn't she sort of cry? I said, but she doesn't know her. Why would she weep over a dead body that she doesn't know? She said, but she's touching. And I said, well, they do. She wants the marks off her wrist. And so I had to fight to retain it the way she was. Because, I mean, Helen was ready for it, though. She wanted to do it. But no, it was called Luck, actually, in very big letters there.
I've got a question about work on spec, because I think that's how you have to get started. And if you could talk about, at least that's been my experience, and I seem to constantly be doing things for people for free, and then it's just sort of the project gets swept under, or something else comes along, and you know, it never happens, or the show gets canceled. And, you know, it just seems to be one thing after another. And then the other question I had, are you going to produce with Cougar Films Royal Flush? Is that what your plan is? That's
And
what
I have
thought.
money in to do it, yes. So it's
Excellent.
good. Who's going to take that? Shall I take it again? Yeah? It's just on spec. You don't get somebody to come in and fit your windows on spec. Writers are, to me, the only people that are required to write virtual script on spec. And it's very, very dangerous. So, you're protected with an agent, which I keep saying, it is quite difficult, because an agent will say, well, I need to see your work before I can take you on. So on spec is difficult. So don't waste time on, writing a big manuscript. Sniff it out. Not necessarily able to do like I did with Prime Suspect, but sniff what they want. Get it to the right person. And as I said, get that treatment down to fine art. I would never, ever send a script on spec. Treatment, yeah, but not a script.
But, I'm not sure, are you answering, what you want to know is it valuable to write a script on spec, as opposed to getting a development deal, as opposed to having...
I guess the thing is that if you don't have an agent, and getting an agent is
Very
Yeah, it's difficult.
Joyce
Yeah.
Katay says, I work at a major theater. She said, I want a letter from your literary agent for me to even look at your play. And this is somebody I have a working relationship with. I've known her for 3 years. So
No, you're in a catch-22 situation. An agent wants to make money. If you're not making money, they don't
Right.
want you. But how do you make money if you don't have an agent?
Exactly. And
That's
so then somebody comes along and says, listen, I have this deal. If you'll write it for me, then I'll go sell it. And then, 10 years later, they want to option it again. It just seems that everybody wants to hire you, but nobody wants to give you money to do it. And that's what it is at the ground.
But I think there is a value. If there is a story that you want to tell, if there's something that really means something to you, to write a great script, that's an investment. That's an investment in who you are and in your future. And from that script, you can get an agent. And, I really believe that, that's the best way to start out.
No, it's honestly, that is a dream way, and it would be nice to work like that. But it doesn't work like that, because you've spent 4 years writing a script with love and care, and it's your dream. You've poured everything in it. And 2 weeks before you've sent it out, somebody's got a movie already out with the same subject matter. So immediately they're going to say, oh, this has been done. So it's how do you get a Lynn Nesbitt, an agent, when you're a writer? And sadly, you are in a catch-22 situation, because they want to see your work before it goes in. So new screenwriting is very tough to get a leg in. So what I'm saying is, keep knocking on the door, but not with a full script. You may write that privately, and then say when the commission comes, how long will it take you to write? Well, it might take me about 6 weeks. You've got it in a drawer.
You should also, screenplay, obviously, feature films, particularly Hollywood feature films, are the top of the pecking order. Like, if I'm going to start fishing, I ain't going to get a boat and go out to the canyon looking for, the blue marlin. You got to fish where the fish are. I would, just knowing TV, I would start looking at TV series that are getting a bit threadbare, 3 or 4 years old. Look at a couple of the characters that are good, that are also getting a bit threadbare in the storyline, and come up with a storyline for that character and send it to the co-exec, study try and figure out who the showrunner is and who's looking after that, who wrote which script. And so then you're fishing in a pond where they're going to look for ideas. Let me tell you, by the 3rd year of a TV series, they're banging their heads on the wall, because maybe Aaron Sorkin, even the West Wing's starting to get a bit crusty now. You know what I mean? It's like...
Well, the good thing is also to check on the independents who made them. They're the companies that are always looking for writers.
And there's A&E, Showtime. You gotta look for opportunities and see what the road is through. But also always backed up for me with theater, because that's particularly in I know New York. It's hard to get your play up, but off Broadway, people go looking for talent in terms of actors and writers and stuff, and that for me is the way to break in.
I want to address that point that Terry has made several times. It's very hard to get a show on in New York, but there are readings, and there are organizations that do readings, and agents go there, and casting people go there, and producers go there, and there's no question writing a script for spec is likely to lead you nowhere. But if you write, as Terry has suggested, 2 characters, 3 characters, even 4 characters, and in a one act or a short play, and can get a reading of it, and can get some, and get it on just for a reading. It's the beginning, and you begin to build a network of people who know other people who know other people, unless they go here, talk to that person, go to that person. I know an agent, give this person a call. He's looking for somebody, she's looking for somebody. It's a way in, and that's all you need. I mean, you need a way in, and you need also to begin to become part of that mix of people who just know what's happening and hear stories and trade gossip, and it moves from, because so much of it is not merely talent. There's a lot of talent out there. It's also luck, and luck has to do with being around and knowing where to go for the luck, and paying attention.
But it's also going to where the story is. It's no use all sitting in this room. Like, the district came from Jack Maple, the Deputy Police Commissioner of New York, who was my fishing buddy. But and I listened to him and I thought, this guy's a genius here. And he was a genius. And I turned that into a TV series. In the Name of the Father came from Jerry Conlon, who in a whole different way was a different genius. But you're sitting listening to him and you're just soaking it in. The Boxer came from 3 or 4 characters. Bright Shining Lie was you got to get out and get into the circumstance. Maybe science fiction writers can do this. I couldn't do science fiction. No way. But I need that parasitic feed off people to hear their language, hear their story. Their stories are always better than anything that's written in fiction, I think. It's fantastic. It's like Linda says, Inspector, what was her name? Tennyson walks in the door. The characters walk in the door to you. The script I'm doing at the moment about it's a 5-star hotel in the Rwandan genocide, which it literally is. But the character just jumped off the page for me. Here's the first black manager of a 5-star hotel in West Africa, is the only person in the Rwandan genocide to save anyone. He saved 1,200 people in that hotel. I went, and I went after him. I knocked HBO out of the box. They were going to do it. I literally flew to Belgium with a checkbook and in the Name of the Father, the whole thing. He's driving a cab now. I found him. Cab, sit down. Here's my movies. Here's a check. Bang. Called HBO. Said you don't have the rights. Bye bye. Because the character just jumped at me. And that's, if you see something like that or hear a story like that, you gotta go after it, but be there beside these people, listening and soaking it up.
If I could add one thing about the writing or not writing on spec, my husband and I, Kevin and I, had a different experience, which is we wrote on spec to calm down when we were upset about other things going on, like a book turned down or this or that. We wrote in our spare time for fun together. And finally, when we met somebody who could do something for us, which was Terrence Malick, and we finally got up the nerve to say, Terry, how do you get into this business? And he said, do you have any scripts? We said, yes. He said, send them to me. We did. And he said, you can write, I love this. What else do you have? That's the first question. And the second was, would you like to do this or that? We're interested in this kind of thing. What do you think of this idea? Do you think you could handle this? And of course, my husband said yes before we'd even thought it through. But that was a situation where what we had was called a calling card, something that we had. We trusted him. We knew he wasn't going to take it and, try to produce it behind our backs. But it was a foot in the door, as Jules just said, luck, sheer luck of being in the right place at the right time and taking advantage of that luck. And you can create luck. You have to have some material to show somebody so they can get, have trust in you and faith in you that you can actually write it. And the other thing is, as Jules said, pure luck. I mean, you can go find. I love Terry's suggestion too, the idea of, going and finding out who needs, those shows that are getting threadbare, who needs a good story. This is all. There was another question. I'm sorry, I interrupted there, but I do believe that you do need at least one good screenplay in the drawer to show somebody if that opportunity, and you can also copyright them very cheaply through the Writers Guild. There was another hand up.
Okay, so you've got a great story. I'm gathering that it's better to send in a treatment first. Is that correct?
I think so.
But is it not? I mean, surely if one gets just a few pieces of paper, they're more likely to gobble that up for free than if you send in. In other words, the idea of things being
for free. That's okay.
Yeah.
Because that's not taking you 6 months.
Right.
Your
but
6
it's your
months' work,
ideas.
I'm saying work on privately. That's
Okay.
yours. Your treatment of it, send that in.
Okay.
If they're interested and you get in, you are in the door. I'm just saying, to get in the door, you send a full 200-odd page script. It will not get read.
Okay, and then Mr. Feiffer, you had mentioned, the business of getting to know people and establishing that background first. In the book world, there's websites like Publishers Lunch, which sometimes are pretty interesting. Is there something similar for screenwriters in a website?
You got me. I don't
I think there's a
know.
mountain of them.
Yeah.
A lot of which charge, and you have to be careful about. There's. I'm sure if you go to Google and type in screenwriting forum, you'll get 300. The Writers Guild actually has one itself on both. So that's good. But like Jules said, the important thing is also to put yourself in the writing community, or that the dramatic community, so that there's whether that's theatre or get to know the actor's circle. I think that's important as well.
We have time for a couple more questions, sir.
I have a short, boring question that goes back to the car chase thing. It's better to just write car chase. I know that from working in Hollywood that directors want to do all that themselves.
Yes.
But when you're trying to, so on that script, the director gets to choose. But when you're trying to interest people, does it make sense to do more interior kind of stuff to interest them in the characters than you would on the script that the director's going to be working with?
In my opinion, if you as a writer are going through a script thinking, oops, I better have more interior here, out there. It's not. What you've got to do as a writer is look at the content of the story, read it through, just write it through, push it through. If when that push has come through, which is your first rough draft, and you're reading it, and you've got interior, it's closing in. If you want it to close in, that's fine. If you want it to breathe, you've got to look for places to move it out. Tom Fontana of Homicide ran out of money for his 6th or 7th show. So he wrote exactly what you said. He wrote a 2-hander. That got the Emmy.
Yeah.
But he wanted a script that was enclosed, tight, that didn't go out. The pressure, it was like a pressure cooker in the scene. It was just getting heavier and heavier and heavier. And there were more, and tension. That was on purpose. I don't think you should sit there going, whoops, this is, ooh, haha, go there. That comes down the line. Get that first one out.
For me also, it's a visual medium, so I have to have the story kind of figured out. When I do a story, it's different colored Post-its are on the wall there, the whole wall full. And there's, day and night, and there's different characters, and there's the 3 plots, and I can sit and you can sort of see, if you've got like a whole line of blue, something's wrong here. The balance of the thing is kind of wrong, but I also see the flow of the story. And then I come in one day and a Post-its fell off, and I'm like, oh, Jesus Christ. The story's, that's the end of that. But I can see it there, and I can see the end, and then I can sit down. Sheridan and I argued for about 6 months over In the Name of the Father, and then wrote it in a week in a hotel. But we were like, well, this, that, and blah, blah, blah. But
That's the hardest part.
we knew the story so intimately, by the time we sat down to write it, was just whooshed out it came.
Terry, did you do an outline first before the cards?
Yeah, well, I think you've also got to know the premise. The New Testament. Jesus Christ was born and died on the cross for us. You've got to have 2 sentences. This is what this is about. And then it expands. But for me, actually, in nonfiction, which I love, the story's there. It's just how how do you then encapsulate it into the drama that becomes entertainment? That's a whole different thing. And actually, Linda Seeger has a very good book called "Turning Fact into Film," that brings up a lot of the intrinsic problems that you have with real stories, which is usually that the character is not as heroic as you thought he was, or similar thereof, you know.
There was something on. I'm addicted to Crown Core. I'm like, I'm there. 9 o'clock in the morning, I'm there. And the other day, there was a tape recording of the man that found the child, the little victim. And I'm doing something, and I suddenly say they're now going to play the tape of the man who discovered the body of the child. Nothing in your mind, if you're a writer doing a 911 call-in, would go this route. He was it was the weirdest score because he was so emotional. He couldn't speak. He couldn't get it out. He kept saying, "I want to go home. I want to go home. I want to go." And he couldn't speak. And the woman on the end of the phone was just calm down, just keeping him down. The dramatic content of that section, be it on a TV show, or put it in a movie, that goes bing, bing, bing into my brain, and I'll steal it. And that's another thing. A writer is like a kind of, he'll steal all over the place. I mean, I'm reading a book and I think, ooh, I like that sentence. You steal it.
I mean, we're plagiarists. That's the business. You try to disguise it as much as you can. But that's what, I watched, like, The Cuckoo's Nest, when we were doing In the Name of the Father, I'm sitting saying, this is fucking genius here. How can we get that McMurphy character in the, poof, give me that. I want it. And if we could figure out, how do you take a Los Angeles cops chasing a bad guy reality thing on television, how do you put that into a movie? Anyone who in this room can crack that are going to be a zillionaire. Because every other week, 80 million people are watching the TV for 6 hours to see what the hell's going to happen to this car at the end of the day. And usually it's, 90% of the time the guy's going to get out and do that there. But you can't stop watching it. So what's that dramatic thing there? That tension. Well,
they want another OJ. That's what they
but they want at the end. Fast, my God, he's going to jump out of here with a machine gun and give these cops it, and that'll be it, The mind projects stuff, and there's also that quantity in writing that you allow the audience to project as much as you possibly can. I mean, Spielberg is a genius at doing that, with E.T. and all. You're projecting stuff that's going to happen ahead of time. And I always think it's wrong to solve stuff for the audience in every scene. You've got to build the tension up with them no matter what happens. Particularly with non-fiction. They're going in there knowing what the story is. Everybody knew Jerry Conlon got out. So we've no ending. Do you know what I mean? Paul, anyway.
One more question for our panel. Judy?
Oh, thanks. I had taken an abbreviated version of one of those famous screenwriting courses, and from it I distilled one lesson that if we had any idea, it had to use the verb meets, like Godzilla meets the Scarlet Letter, a young monster had an out-of-wedlock child, and they told us that that's high concept, and if you can't put it down into a single sentence with meets, you can't market a script, which I thought was very sad because it doesn't allow for much that's original. So I just wanted to address you to address that comment, that particular lesson.
I honestly think it's such crap. Extraordinary. I can't believe that people are sitting there going, the dog meets. You can't do that.
It's like Jules says, it's a lack of vocabulary of the real world. Independence Day meets The Godfather or whatever. And I don't know what high concept. There's the high concept. What the hell is that about? And laying pipe is the other one. They don't say, "Oh, you haven't laid enough pipe for this." I better get a plumber on the phone here to see what they're talking about. The best fun I ever had, which was truly great, was you have to be with Jim Sheridan at a story pitch. He was a genius. He was a genius. He'd get them all sitting there, studio heads, and they're talking about laying pipe and all, and he'd say, no, here's what it is. It's like Antigone goes down into Orpheus and he fucks his mother, and that's what it's about, you know, and he's like Greek mythology and they're gobsmacked. That's it, gone. He has Antigone and Orpheus and, crossing the sticks and all the metaphors, because he comes from Irish theatre and studied Greek theatre, and he knows his shit. So he just blew them out of the water, and he'd go outside and say, laugh at me, ho, 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 that's it. They're gonna green light it. They don't know what we're doing here. It was great. But he was right. It was family. All drama comes from the family structure, you know. The son wants to kill the father because he sleeps with the mother who he wants to sleep with. Boom. Off you go.
On that lovely note, I really would like to thank our panelists who just really made this day wonderful. Thank you so much.